Hey, and welcome back to another video. And in this video, we're going to take a look at animation curves and all the different possible types. We're also going to look at how we can manipulate timings and add delays. So let's get straight into it. So what is an animation curve? Well, an animation curve is a way of describing how you want an animation to start and finish. Do you want it to be linear? Do you want it to start quick and end slow? These are all things that you can take control of with animation curves. So we have this website here called cubicbezier.com, which allows us to actually see and compare cubic bezier, so animation curves between one another. So what's going on here is that this pink one is our own customized curve that we can do, and this right now is using a linear animation curve, but we actually have options here where we can see on our blue square the different types of animations that we want to apply. So what we can do is we actually change this to ease, and our pink is linear. You'll see when we hit go, you'll notice that our ease has a different speed compared to the linear. And if we do ease out, you'll see that we also have different speeds as well. Well, first of all, let's create our sync view that will be used in our grid. And also, it's worth noting that this view is what we use in our previous video, animations in SwiftUI. So if you want to see how to build the sync view, then check out that video. But let's get straight into it. So I'm just going to add this in now, and then we'll briefly break it down. Okay, cool. So just briefly, what we have here is we have our is syncing, which dictates whether our view should be syncing. And we also have our rotation animation here, which for now has been set to ease in and out. And we just have an SF symbol that we're just rotating in the 360 degrees. Now let's actually add this view into some kind of grid. So let's do this now. So in our content view, we'll actually create a LazyVGrid that has 3 columns within it. So let's do that. So you just go into your content view, and then I'm just going to type this out, and then again we'll break it down as usual. Okay, cool. So now what we have here is a scroll view, and within the scroll view we have a LazyVGrid, we have a column. So we're specifying that we want 3 flexible columns, so this will spread out and fill out 3 views on the width of the screen that it can. And then we're saying that we want a spacing of 16 between each row, and if I actually increase this, you'll see that it gets bigger. And then finally, what we're saying is we want to loop through 0 to 10, and we're going to display a sync view for each item. Now, as of right now, we're just hard coding this to 0 to 10. What we will do is we'll actually get this for each to build out a sync view based on some kind of model. So what we want to do is we're going to build a configuration that we can actually pass into our sync view, so we can actually define an individual animation curve for each sync view. So let's actually create a model called animation config, and we'll break it down. What we've got here is we've got our animation config, and we're saying that we want this to be identifiable because we want each configuration to be unique. We're also going to give it a animation property, so we can declare the animation that we want, and a description to just briefly describe what this animation is. And you'll notice that all of them have been made as constants because we only want to set this once. We don't want to be able to, change the description or the animation later. So now what we're going to do is create a dummy array of data, and we're going to declare all the animations that we want to see on the screen. So let's do that now. So I've now got an animation config. So I'm doing an extension on animation config, and I've got this static constant called options. So within this array, like I said before, we specify the animation and the description, and you can see I've done an ease in and out, ease in, ease out, and a linear. And we're going to add in more animations here that will appear on our grid. So now that we have our source of truth for all the animations that we want on our screen, what we're going to do now is actually pass this directly into our for each rather than using a hard-coded range. So let's replace this. Well, let's replace all of this because we don't need the ID self because our animation config is already identifiable. And instead, let's just say animation config dot options, like so. Now, what we're going to do is I'm just going to change the name of this from item to config just to make it a bit more clearer. And now what we want to do is actually pass in our config directly into our sync view. So let's go into our sync view, and we're going to create a constant in here called config, and the type is going to be animation config. Now, when you do this, you should get an error in your SwiftUI preview, which is fine. And in order to fix this, all we're going to do is just hit fix, and then we're just going to say dot options dot first to get the first animation config out of that array. And then finally, what we're going to say here is that rather than us declaring explicitly that we want this to be ease in and out, we're going to replace this with config dot animation. So we're actually using the animation directly from the config that we pass into this view. Then what we're going to do is in our VStat, we're going to add in some text below our image to just describe the configuration of this animation. So below the image, we're going to say text, and then we're going to say config dot description. So now we have a description below our animation, and we actually just look at this in the SwiftUI preview when it updates. You'll see that we have an error, and the reason why is because if you go back to your content view, you'll notice that it's actually saying that you need to pass in the config to the sync view. So let's actually do this now. Cool, and now you can see that we actually have our animations on the screen with their descriptions. So if you actually look at it, you'll see that right now all of these are actually quite quick, and the reason why it's rapid like this is because we've not really specified a duration on the animation, so it's just literally just animating it like super quick. So what we want to do to compare it before we actually break down each one and see how it looks is we actually want to add in more animations where we actually specify the duration for the ease in and out, ease in, ease out, and linear. So let's actually do this now. So just go back here. So what we're going to do is just type, I'm just going to type this out and then we'll break it down. So now, as you can see, we've actually slowed down the animations to 1.5 seconds. And you can see that just by having this model here now with all these options, we're able to easily preview and see what our animation will look like with different animation curves. So let's actually break this down. So if you actually look at ease in and out, you'll notice that the animation, when you actually zoom in on it, it eases in, and then as it goes out, it slows down. So in the middle part, it's a normal speed. So ease in, you can see that it eases into it, and at the end it just stops like a harsh stop. And with ease in and out, you'll see that it's a normal, but as it goes out to the end of the animation, it slows down. I can see that with linear, it's just a continuous animation. So depending on what it is that you want to do, you can now kind of see how these animation curves differ and will change the interactivity of your apps. So if we wanted to as well, we could actually play with the timings a bit more and actually add a delay to our sync view. So what we're going to do is just copy this linear one here. And then this time on our linear, we're going to just add a delay of half a second to see what happens in between. So let's do that now. So if you just look at our linear 1.5 with a delay. So let's just run this on our SwiftUI preview again. You'll notice now that when it stops, so you'll see that it stops for half a second and then it restarts. So it's not continuous compared to this one. So that's how you can add a delay in between animations. So also after adding this delay, if we wanted to, we can actually change the way that this is actually being repeated. So rather than this being a continuous repeat, we can actually specify that we want this to reverse. So if I just set this auto reverse to true, let's just see what effect this has. So now you can see that when we set auto reverse to true, it's actually animating it, but as it gets to the end, it now goes back to the start. So you can see here that we get this weird animation, which is what we don't want. So let's turn that off. So now let's go back to our example where we set our auto reverses to false, and you'll see now that we get our spinners going all in the same right direction. So we looked at all the animation curves, but what I actually want to look at is another two. And the next one I want to look at is the animation curves called animation curve timings. So before we actually look into that, let's just go back to our site. And as you can see here, when you're working with animation curves, you have something called a qubit bezier. You can actually specify how you want the speed and force of the animation to, behave when you play around with the qubit bezier. So you can actually create your own custom animations like so. So what I'm just going to do is just do this. animation like so. And then now if we actually compare the two, you'll see that we almost get like a ease in and out animation on our pink view. So what we're able to do is actually use these values directly in SwiftUI when we create our own cubic bezier animations, and this is done using that timing function that I was talking about. So let's go back into our model and we're going to create a new animation. So underneath here we're just going to say dot init, and then within this initializer we're going to say dot, and then if you scroll down you should see that there's an option called timing curves. So we want to use timing curves, and we want to use the option where we just specify the duration like so. So in our first option here, what we want to do is copy what we have in our Google Chrome. So let's go into Chrome and we have 0.14. So let's put that in here. And then in our second one, we have 0.72. And then we have 0.65 and 0.38 and a duration of 1. So let's add that in also. And then within our description, we're just going to say that we want to say that this is a custom bezier curve. Cool. So now what we've done is we've now moved our animation curve that we built here directly into Swift. So let's actually preview this now. And now you can see that we actually have our custom bezier curve here. And you can see that it's slow, and in the middle it speeds up, and as it goes out it speeds down. It's actually a great way for you to create your own custom animation curves on this website and preview them and then add them into Swift. So we also have another set of curves as well called springs, but we're going to be tackling these ones in a different video because we're doing a rotation effect here, and springs don't really work that great in my opinion with rotation effects. But if you want to see a good example of springs, check out my previous video that I mentioned animation in SwiftUI and also LazyGrids in SwiftUI that show you how you can work with spring animation curves as well. Cool, so that's everything in this video. If you enjoyed this video, I really appreciate it if you left some feedback in the comment section below. Also as well, if you haven't already, I'd really appreciate it if you gave this video a thumbs up, as well as subscribing to the channel and hitting the notification bell to get updates whenever I release a new update. That's everything from me. I'll catch you on a bit. Deuces.